Katie Quinn describes her book as delicious staples of a great meal. Bread, cheese, and wine develop their complex flavors through a process known as fermentation. Katie Quinn spent months as an apprentice with some of Europe's most acclaimed experts to study the art and science of fermentation. Visiting grain fields, vineyards, and dairies, Katie brings the stories and science of these foods to the table, explains the process of each craft, and introduces the people behind them. Hi, I'm Paul from Trending Who, What, Where, and When. Today I'll be speaking with Katie Quinn about her book, Cheese, Wine, and Bread. Katie will be joining us from Puglia in southern Italy.
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Quinn. I'm the author of the book Cheese, Wine, and Bread, Discovering the Magic of Fermentation in England, Italy, and France. And it makes sense that I'm talking to you from where I live in southern Italy in the region of Puglia. This is the cathedral behind me. And the reason I'm living here now has everything to do with when I was traveling around Italy researching this book. So I'm excited to talk about that and everything else. Hope you'll stick around.
So please tell us where you would bring people when they come to visit you there.
Okay, well, so we've been thinking about that and planning that. We have yet to have visitors because of COVID, of course.
Okay.
But my parents are coming for several weeks at the end of summer, early autumn. And Connor's parents are also coming for a bit in September. So we have been game planning where to take them, what to do with them. We live right on the Adriatic Sea, so I mean the ocean is the first thing to do, and there's all kinds of activities around that, of course, boats and stand-up paddle boards and surfing, obviously.
Well, how will they get there from Ohio? They would fly to Rome first?
Yes, let's see. I think what they're doing is flying to Rome. I think it goes like this: Columbus, Ohio to New York City,
Okay.
New York City to Rome, Rome to Bari.
Okay.
Bari is the closest airport to where we are here in Trani. It's about a half hour away, so it's pretty close.
Okay, so they don't need to take the train or anything. They fly the whole way.
They're flying the whole way, and then we'll pick them up from the airport and be on our way.
Wow. Will this be the first trip there?
They have been to Italy before, but never to this region. And my mom in particular is really excited because we're about 2 hours away is where her grandfather was born. So we'll be going there and trying to, meet up with some long lost relatives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
It sounds like it. Well, tell us about your book, Cheese, Wine, and Bread.
Well, I think that the subtitle says a lot. The subtitle is Discovering the Magic of Fermentation in England, Italy, and France. And that's it. That's pretty much it. It's a kind of travel narrative, like come along with me as I travel through England, Italy, France. And as I really get down and dirty, like deep diving, immersing myself into these three things: cheese, wine, and bread, right? Some of humanity's oldest and most essential foods. And it's true. This is from the introduction of the book. I'm not a highly curated, picture perfect human. I'm a quirky line drawing scribbles person. Also, I would operate at lightning speed if I could, but thankfully I found an antidote to this haste: fermentation. When things aren't moving fast enough for me, fermentation reminds me of the value of waiting. Feeding my sourdough starter every morning, brewing a new batch of kombucha weekly, at the risk of sounding like an unhinged hipster, these are the routines that ground me. The practice of fermentation is as old as civilization itself, but the splendor of it found me in my early 30s as I was settling into my new home. in London. Bread and beer, kimchi and sauerkraut, wine and cheese, all are examples of fermented products. Many of our most common kitchen items are. Fermentation is right under our noses, but it is only now entering most people's awareness. So I felt like I had to kind of contextualize fermentation as what some people would call a trend. I felt like I had to note that straight away in the introduction. And then I go on to talk about its significance to me and in my life.
I'm just amazed at how much research you would have had to do to write this book.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the British Library, which is an incredible resource. I was so lucky that I was living in London at the time that I was writing this, because I did so much research about the science, about fermentation. I did so much research about the places and the cultures. Yeah, this felt like writing a master's thesis.
So it looked like it took between 3 and 4 years for you to complete this.
Yeah, that is about how long it took, because after I first got the idea, I was like, well, no one's just going to give me a book deal based on just the idea. So I need to start doing some of this stuff, get some of the elements visually that I would want in this hypothetical book I want to put together, and then also have these experiences and learn some things, and really put myself in some of these immersive situations that I will be pitching that I do. So I would say it was about a year, maybe closer to 8 months of just starting to do the things, working at a vineyard in northern Italy, cheesemongering at a cheese shop in London, before I was then able to say, okay, here I wrote some sample chapters, wrote some sample recipes, and was like, here's what I've done so far. I want to keep doing it. I want to do more. And if you give me a book deal, this is what else I'll do.
You had put a lot of effort into this in advance.
Yeah, I did. I was kind of banging. And I asked myself, like, if I don't get a book deal, will I still do this? And will I still write this book just for me? Because at that point, I was fully invested in this thing. Right. And I was just trying to get other people to back me up on it. And luckily I did. And I never had to kind of make that executive decision. Like, do I kill this darling that I've just begun? Or do I keep going regardless? Yeah.
Well, then, so you started out the immersive experiences working in England as a cheesemonger.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was living in London at the time. And so it came after I did a video project with the Comté Cheese Association. So Comté cheese is this incredible Alpine style cheese from France. And this brand of cheese invited me to come have an immersive week learning about Comté cheese and then making videos about it for my YouTube channel. So I did. And I loved it. And I loved it so much that I realized I wasn't done. I wasn't ready to remove myself from that situation. At that end of that week, I was just like, how can I keep doing this? How can I keep learning more? This has been really awesome. And, typically as a journalist and video creator and, video journalist, I tend to dip my foot in something and move on, right? Very much like a butterfly visiting different flowers. With cheese, and like that was the real like first aha moment before I had this idea of the trifecta of cheese, wine, and bread. With cheese, I realized, wait a second, I'm not ready to move on to my next subject. I want to immerse myself fuller. And that was like a really cool feeling to have. I don't usually with projects. I'm like, that was fun. That was cool. I learned something. What's next? Yeah. So I asked my contact at the Comté Cheese Association, I was like, Hey, like, what would you suggest for me? I loved this a lot. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Is there any, let me know if there's anything else cheese related I can do. And he said, well, Katie, you lived in, or you live in London. Neil's Yard Dairy is there, and it's one of the preeminent cheese shops in like the world. You should meet them. And in fact, let me connect you with them. He sent an email, and the next month I was working there.
And then while you were working there, you were invited to be a judge at the World Cheese Awards.
Yeah, well, that actually came a little bit later. Let's see. So I cheesemongered, and cheesemonger for people who don't know is a person who works at a cheese shop who is kind of, you know, the cheese expert who helps advise you on cheeses that you'll buy. So I did the seasonal shift at Neil's Yard Dairy, which is to say during the Christmas season. So pretty much all of December, when the vast majority of cheese is sold and bought in England, because Christmas is very much a cheese holiday in England. And I did that for 3 years in a row. And the only reason I didn't do it the last year was because I had moved to Italy. So I couldn't. But because I was really bit by the bug, and it's a fantastic place to work. Anyway, I was asked to be a judge at the World Cheese Awards. It was either after I had already cheesemongered for 2 years, or even the full 3 years, maybe just for 2 years. But yeah, so I had quite a bit of experience under my belt by then.
So then you moved and lived in Italy and learned to make wine there.
Yeah. There's so many wines in Italy too. So I was in northern Italy in a region called Friuli, right on the Slovenian border. Beautiful mountainous area. And they have like grapes that I had never heard of in my life, like Pignolo. What is that? But it's a beloved grape from that area. And I then learned that Italy is full of these native grape varieties, these indigenous grapes that are really not super well known or popular anywhere else in the world. And in some cases, it's like really impossible to find anywhere else in the world. So I was really intrigued by this, and that Italy has more native grape varieties than any other country in the world. And I was just really fascinated by that and really wanted to learn more.
After that, then you lived in France and did bread making.
Yeah. So that's exactly, yeah. So this is how I split it up. It's like cheese in England, wine in France, wine in Italy, bread in France. And, you know, the reason that I split them up like this was that my theory was that if I get super specific versus trying to write an encyclopedia about cheese, wine, and bread, talking about cheeses from all around the world and wines from all around the world and bread, like getting super specific, narrowing it down and having these immersive experiences actually would have the result of speaking to these products and the artisans who make these products and the cultures around these products and the challenges that these artisans face. It actually makes what I'm saying and talking about global, but it gives it a specificity that makes it easier for a reader to understand. And that offers a narrative that a reader can actually relate to. And that is why I put myself in the book as like a character of sorts, right? I talk about my personal experiences, and I do that not because I love writing about myself, but because I was actually unsure of that at the beginning. I wasn't sure how much I wanted to include of myself. At the end, it just became so obvious to me that I needed to share about myself and actually perhaps be more vulnerable than I wanted to be in order for the reader to care, in order for the reader to learn about these things about cheese, wine, and bread, in order for the reader to follow me on this adventure. They needed to care about me and the crap I was going through. So I realized, okay, Katie, you gotta be a bit of an open book here. And you have to be really honest.
That would be difficult, I think.
There were a lot of times that I wrote something, deleted it, and then, the chapter was finished and I was like, I need to include this. Otherwise it makes no sense. The reader doesn't know why I have just lifted myself out of this place and put myself there. And it's because of this. It's all a ripple effect, right? It's like, it's impossible to separate the personal from the passion for cheese, wine, and bread. That's what I learned.
I think if not, then it might have been more of a textbook rather than the book that it became.
Yeah. And textbooks have their place. Absolutely. But I'm not a textbook person.
There's a good combination of both.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you showcase many beautiful recipes in your book. Which are your favorites?
Oh my gosh. You know that this is like choosing a favorite child. Okay, I'll tell you the ones that I make all the time. And then I'll tell you a few of my absolute favorite kind of a little more special occasion ones. Okay. So I make all the time in my kitchen that red wine pasta, the spaghetti all'ubriaco, drunken pasta. It's so good. It's just basically spaghetti that it finishes cooking in red wine. So it gets this gorgeous plum hue. It is delicious. It's garlicky and has some kick from red chili flakes. It's just amazing and it looks beautiful. So not only is it a weeknight staple, because indeed it's like basically all pantry items, but it also is a total showstopper for a dinner party, which is like, when do you find that combination? Okay, so that's one. Another, I must say, and this is the one I feel like I've talked about and other people have talked about a lot since this book has come out, is my cheddar brownies, because they're just amazing. Like literally, they're just really good, and not for the novelty factor. This is why I make them all the time. They're just a great sweet treat to have on hand. So the cheddar brownies, and for anyone who's watching is like, what, cheddar brownies? This is chunks of cheddar cheese in a fudgy, incredible brownie batter. Honestly, the brownie recipe itself, even minus the cheddar, I've had people, every person I've heard from has said, this is the best brownie recipe that I've ever tried. And then the cheddar chunks just like takes it to the next level because it's sweet and savory perfection. The cheddar gets caramelized and nutty, and it's just a beautiful thing. And okay, another wine one. Wine biscuits, cimballine al vino. The wine biscuits are made with basically equal parts wine, sugar, and flour, and olive oil. Can't forget that one. Special occasion ones would be the white wine and olive oil cake with red wine, buttercream frosting, and a boozy mascarpone filling. Incredible. It's Connor's absolute favorite cake now. And anytime there's an occasion to make a cake, that's the one I make.
Well, you've done really well on Amazon with your ratings. Congratulations on that. Would you like to tell us about that? How you managed that?
I don't even know. So first of all, thank you. And I think I'm excited about it. I think it's done well. This is also, so technically it's my second book. I wrote the Avocados cookbook in 2017. That was with an indie Brooklyn publishing house called Short Stack Editions. This was my first big publishing house. Like this was my first kind of big deal book, if you will. And so much of this has just been a learning process. The learning curve was actually pretty massive, even though technically I had published a book before. And I haven't known what to expect. I haven't known what what makes it a success. How do we call a book or any piece of work or any piece of art for that matter a success or a failure? And I've thought a lot about this, and I actually have decided my definition of success is, did I learn something? Did I meet incredible people? And did I get to do this and call it a job for a bit of my life? And yes, I got to do all three of those things. So I'm like, to me, on a personal level, this book is a huge success. And I feel like I have to remember that regardless of ratings. That being said, I won't look at the Amazon, I won't look at the ratings, but my husband will. And of course, I am absolutely thrilled when he's told me that it's shot up as it has. Yeah.
Quickly too. Your book is new.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and it's an evergreen topic as well, right? Cheese, wine, and bread. Those things aren't going away anytime soon. So here's hoping that it has legs. That's what I'm more excited about, that it really sticks around and that people really love it and keep it on their bookshelf.
I think more than half the books on Amazon that have good ratings in the top 100 are over 2 years old.
Really?
So I look on there weekly and check, looking for things.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Very few new books get high ratings quickly.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing that. That is really fascinating. And I'm actually really, really happy to hear that.
And I think once the people see your ratings, then other people will be more likely to read it because they see you get all these ratings. It's a new book.
That's how it happens. Right? It is a bit of a snowball effect.
Tell us a little bit about your first book, Avocados. On your website, it looks beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's really cool. It's hand illustrated. Yeah, hand drawn. The illustrations are beautiful, and yeah, it's a cute, quirky little book, right? Kind of matches my quirkiness. There's, I think, 24 recipes. All of them, of course, have avocados as the star ingredient. So this is a part of a series of cookbooks called the Short Stack Editions, and each of them focuses on one ingredient, right? So it's kind of one ingredient cookbooks. So for example, there's a strawberries cookbook, there's a yogurt cookbook, there is an eggplant cookbook, there's a honey cookbook, right? And on and on. I think there's close to 30 different one ingredient cookbooks, and they all have, they're aesthetically very much they're matching aesthetically in terms of kind of like the design, the style, these hand-drawn illustrations. And yeah, and it's great. It's a fun little book, but certainly nothing like the project that I took on with Cheese, Wine, and Bread.
It wasn't the 3 or 4 year commitment of effort and
yeah, I didn't have to do any traveling for that. I didn't have to reach out and meet people. Yeah, that one was much more kitchen focused, of just recipe testing, essentially.
Do you think we'll see Cheese, Wine, and Bread as a movie?
That would be excellent. That would be excellent. I mean, personally, I think that it would be awesome as like a Netflix series or something, like a, real life Netflix series going around England, France, and Italy, deep diving into these things. If it were a movie though, that'd be fun. I'd watch it.
Actually, Netflix would be good. They have these ones now where it's a season. It's got like 10 shows.
Exactly. I think it would work well there.
Who do you think would be good to play your part?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I am going to say she's one of my favorite actresses. And actually, when I worked at NBC at the beginning of my career, I had the opportunity to meet her, and she is very, very nice. So I'm a fan all around. Rachel McAdams.
Okay.
Although she might, because she's already older than I am, and I don't know, but whatever. I think she could pull it off. I'd have Rachel McAdams do it.
And who would play her husband, Connor?
Oh, who would play Connor? Well, I think it would have to be Ryan Gosling, because, he and Rachel McAdams were so great in The Notebook.
So what advice would you give to new writers?
Advice to new writers. Well, it depends like what kind of advice they're looking for, what challenges they're facing. There are so many things there are just so many things. Like, so first of all, if you want to write a book but you're not sure what are you so obsessed with that you want to live and breathe that thing, that subject for years of your life. I mean, my career prior to writing this book, it's all very digitally focused. And so it's been very fast paced. I can shoot a video, edit it, put it up on YouTube all within a few days' time. I'm responding to comments immediately, right? It's this loop, this feedback loop. The production and feedback loop is all very instantaneous. And writing a book is the opposite. It's a long process. So I bring this up because you will be surrounded by this topic for a very long time. So really go with something that you have such an appetite for that you don't think you'll get sick of. I have yet to get sick of talking about cheese, wine, and bread. So I think that was a good fit for me.
All of us here watched your video, your YouTube video, how I got my book published. And we'll put the link in here later. And I thought that was extremely good. It explained well what the steps you went through getting it published.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I was really looking forward to putting that video together because obviously, as you see in the video, I was taking clips of the entire process, right? For years, I had been taking these little clips and then putting them in a folder on my hard drive, saving them up to hopefully put together a video like that. So I was really looking forward to doing that and kind of looking back over those moments that I chose to capture. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you think it gave a good sense of the process, because that's exactly what I was hoping for.
I think it also showed how all the other people assisted in the different parts that they played. Together, you all built this project of this book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, quite a few times in the writing of the book, I felt more like a project manager than I did an author. I was like, and which was great. And I loved all the people I worked with. And I am I don't know, a control freak is too harsh of a word, but I certainly had a vision for this book and wanted it executed as I saw it. And so it was wonderful to be at the helms, right? And to be given, like, my publishing house was like, we trust you, do this. And at times I was like, wait, do you want some say in this? Or do you want, just as a somewhat newbie author, I felt like sometimes I was like, tell me what I'm doing is right. And they kind of didn't give me too much of that. But I loved working with the illustrator, collaborating on these amazing watercolors that she did, these charts and graphs and just whimsical illustrations she did. I loved working with the photographers, capturing England, France, and Italy to make the reader feel like they're there with me. These were all elements that were so important to me for the book. And so it was really fun working with these people. Of course, the publishing house did a ton, especially at the end, in terms of design, in terms of cover. And I, again, feel really grateful that they touched base with me throughout all of the decisions, got my okay on them, because I think that's not the case for every author. I'm not sure if you've spoken with authors who have said, "Oh, I hated my cover." I have also anecdotally spoken with some friends who are like, watch out, like they just had nightmare experiences. And I'm happy to say I didn't. I had a really good experience. Yeah. But I remember at one point being like, wait, don't I just write the book? It's like, no, Katie, no, you don't just write the book. There's a ton of other things to do.
I was surprised at the amount of decisions that you did have to make, even with the cover where it had the different colors in the background. Should it be blue? Should it be red? Should it be white?
So fascinating and so fun to like think about. I mean, it's such a cool thing when this thing you've worked on for years is like actually coming together, right? And it's like, oh, this is going to be a real thing. That's really exciting. I imagine it's almost like if you're like building a house, which I've never done, but it's like, you see the blueprints and you make the decisions. What kind of wood do you use? What kind of floors do you want? What kind of all those things.
Yeah.
And then when you can finally, or like, then you actually see it being made and you go in and walk around and talk with the construction people. And then when it's a house that you can move into, that's kind of that. I would say that that's actually a really fitting parallel.
In the previous week, you've done so many interviews about your book. How did you get these interviews and organize them in such a way where you could do them in such a short period from Italy?
For a little bit, it was actually a little bonkers because it was kind of like back to back. Well, and this is why I'll go back to what I said before of like, it's important that you really are like, you can't get enough of whatever you write about, because so I was actually talking with a friend of mine who writes kind of like more businessy books, and her like advice to me ahead of the book coming out and all the publicity stuff was like, only take on a few publicity opportunities, like really narrow it down, because and she was speaking from her experience of talking about her like more businessy style books, because she's like, you will get fatigue. You will get fatigue. Just trust me. And I was like, well, this is, as I've said before, it's my first big deal book. I really want it to do well. I'm going to do anything and everything I can do to do that. So too late. Like, thanks for your advice, but too late. I've already like signed on for like quite a juggernaut of a publicity push. And I'm so happy to say that like I got energy from every single one of those interviews, because I really I believe in this thing, that I believe in this book. I believe in the work that I did and its ability to entertain and educate and make delicious things on people's tables. And yeah, and so I signed on for a lot of things. Thankfully, it's like a little bit slower now. I'm not staying up until 2:00 in the morning here in Italy, which I had been doing pretty regularly during launch week. I had like such jet lag launch week, because I was like, my body does not know what time it is. My body does not have an internal clock right now, but it was worth it. I knew going into it, I was like, I'm going to throw myself into this. It's not sustainable, but it doesn't have to be, because I'm just doing it for these few weeks. Life has normalized now, I'm happy to say. But so it was a combination, really, Paul, like of how I got the interviews. First of all, my book is with the HarperCollins imprint, William Morrow. HarperCollins is a book giant, right? Bookmaking giant. So they had great connections. Also, though, and I talk about this a very little bit in the introduction of the book, but I worked in the media industry in New York City for almost a decade before moving abroad and kind of like pivoting my career. So I knew quite a few people in some pretty great places and outlets, and I was like, hey, I did this thing and I'm really proud of it. Can I talk about it to your audience? So that also worked out well. If one more person hears about the book who's never heard of it, if I can sell one more book that I wouldn't have sold otherwise, to me, it's just completely worth it. Also, just interesting conversations are fun. And I like meeting new people. And I hope that this book has the ability to, reach a lot of people. Like, I hope a lot of people can connect with it. I think they can. I think the potential demographic for this is quite broad. Okay. And I think it'll speak to different people for different reasons.
So has your massive popularity on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube been helpful finding readers for your book?
Yeah, definitely helps. Absolutely. What I would also say with that is that it's at this stage in where the publishing industry is at. And, if it's a good or bad thing, I don't know. I think that all kinds of ways to slice this pie. But it's something that publishing houses are also looking for very much before they even want to give a book deal. So I think, yes, it has absolutely been helpful. No question, in getting the word out about the book. But even from the back end of things to just get the book deal, having that audience was pretty key.
I would think so too, because you would have a huge following that would already be ready to look for things that you're doing. They wouldn't have to do
Absolutely.
all the work. You would be assisting them with some of this.
Yeah. That's pretty much how it works. Yeah. Some more of the immersive experiences I had. So we've talked about how I was a cheesemonger in London, but then that led to me actually living at a farmhouse in rural Somerset at a goat farm, making goat's milk cheese, right? So I was up every morning in the barn at 6 a.m. when the goats were milked and then making goat's milk cheese. That was an incredible experience. Traveled all around England, meeting the cheesemakers, making some of just the best cheeses and all different kinds of cheese, blue cheese and washed rind cheeses, sheep's milk cheese, cow's milk, goat, kind of like the whole gamut. Cheddar makers, of course. And then in Italy, so I did the wine harvest in Friuli, which we briefly talked about. Then again, I traveled the entire country, basically north to south, ended up in Italy, but all the places in between as well. Did a immersive language program in Rome, and just learning all about wine and visiting all these different vineyards. And then France, I actually worked at boulangeries all around France, or in Paris specifically, the boulangeries in Paris. And I really do focus on sourdough in the bread section because I realized that is really the thing to talk about, especially in terms of fermentation. And but I went down south. I went to Marseille, Toulouse, and then up north to Brittany, where I did a immersive training for a week at a farm with the barefoot baker, this guy who bakes bread barefoot using flour from his grains that he grows on his land. So really, really, really cool thing to experience.
So much information in your book.
Yeah, there was a lot. You should have seen my office wall while I was writing. It's just like Post-it notes, like a total crazy person. I just had like Post-it notes everywhere. I was like, how will I make sense of all this? And many hours later, I'm very happy with how it all came together.
Seems like you were generous with all the photographs too. There's so many good color pictures in the book.
Yeah. Thank you. Dan, thank you for saying that. I really wanted it to be a joy to flip through. I wanted almost like that, like travel magazine vibe, right? Yeah. And so, I took the majority of the photos in the book, and that's just because like I had my camera with me everywhere I went and was taking photos, and I take good photos, but I also then hired photographers for certain key moments to get just completely amazing photographs. And then the recipes as well. I had just a recipe photographer in London that I worked with doing all the recipes. But yeah, no, I really wanted it to be a very visual experience, as well as obviously there's a lot of text as well in the story. Well, thank you both of you for giving my book time and thought and love. I appreciate it.